Hello, welcome to Charted, an astrology podcast. My name's James, and today we are going to talk about the sign of Gemini. So before we begin, I just want to apologize if my voice is a little weird. I've been a little sick, which is why this is taking so long to get out. But I think I'm on the mend. We'll see. But if my voice kind of struggles a little bit, that's what's going on. So that being said, the way we're going to look at this, look at Gemini, is we're going to look at two different things. First, we're going to go through the components of the sign. That is kind of the different things that make up the sign, right? The element, the ruler, and so forth. And then we'll take a look at the sign through the houses. And what that means is we will set Gemini to the first house, and then using the whole sign system, we will look at each of the other houses and the signs that are in them to give us an idea of why Gemini tends to act the way it does. And the reason we can look at it this way is because astrology is built on some pretty basic geometric logic. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. But because the zodiac is static, that is, each of the signs is always in the same position relative to the other signs, then we know that, for instance, Aries is always opposite to Libra. Gemini is always trine to Aquarius, right? That relationship is always the same, no matter what house you have Gemini in. And so that means we can look at things relative to that positioning, right? So we can set Gemini to the first house. We can see how the other signs act in a house perspective to Gemini. So that's what we'll do. And that will actually tell us a tremendous amount about the sign that we're looking at. We did that first with Aries. We did that in the last episode with Taurus, and so on. So let's dive in. Let's figure out what Gemini is about. The first of the qualities, we're gonna look at four qualities. The first is going to be the sect. Gemini is a diurnal or a day sign. The day signs are, we could think of it as equivalent to masculine, right? They're referred to also as the masculine signs. What is masculinity in astrology? Masculinity is about two qualities. It is about projecting outwards or externally, and it is about singularity. And the reason it's singular is because as you move away from something, right, it means you're distancing yourself from it. So you're becoming more alone the further out you move. So the masculine dynamic is going to be one of projecting outwards in a very individual manner. So Gemini is going to have some quality of outward projection. The next thing, Gemini is a mutable sign, right? The modalities we can think of as kind of the state of being. Aries was cardinal, Taurus was fixed. The cardinal signs are about proactive initiation. The fixed signs are about holding on to something, preserving something, and attachment. The mutable signs are actually a 50-50 split of both cardinal and fixed. And while this sounds really good at first, kind of first thinking, it's not as great as it would seem, right? Because the issue with the cardinal signs is that they don't have any follow-through, right? They're about starting but not finishing or maintaining or holding on to. The fixed signs are the opposite. They don't want to start things. They just want to hold on to the status quo, which means they become passive and very rigid and inflexible. With the mutable signs and having this combination, they can both start something and hold on to it. But the problem is that the mutable signs are passive first. And so this means they are reactive rather than proactive. And so this is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to give the mutable signs a huge amount of flexibility. But on the other hand, it's going to give them a strong tendency to drift. They're waiting for life to stimulate them before they make change, before they adjust. And so for the mutable signs, there's often this tension of needing something to happen first. And that's going to be the least evident with Sagittarius, and I think the most evident with Pisces. Now, the next quality is going to be the element of air. Gemini is an air sign. What is air about? Well, the air signs are about intellect and about society. The intellectual side, right? Air is going to be about our thoughts, our thinking, right? Our intellectual ideas, intellectualization of things. And it's therefore also going to be how that connects to other things within society. We as humans are a tribal species. We tend to want to be in groups and work in groups and operate in groups. And the thing is for any group to function, there has to be something that allows them to connect so that idea, that thought, can be made known to each other. Because you can't work together if you don't know what the other person's doing or thinking. And so air is going to represent both the thought and the thinking itself and the ability to express that to work and function as a group. So that means air signs are going to be social, they're going to be collective, they're going to be society-oriented in some way, shape, or form, and they're going to be about the thinking and communication of thought and ideas, or communication really of anything. Because communication is taking idea and putting it in a format that the other person can understand. And we'll certainly see this more here in a moment when we look at the ruler of Gemini. So, air signs are collective, they're intellectual, and they're communicative. Air is a masculine sign, but it is less so than fire, right? Fire is very masculine because it's very independent, but because air, even though it's projective, right, projecting thought, it's collective. And so that kind of tones down the masculinity a little bit because there's a cohesiveness. Finally, we get to the ruler of Gemini, which is going to be Mercury. Now, Mercury is an interesting planet. It's the fastest planet. Mercury is about, it's about translation. Why? Well, Mercury is the planet that takes the external world and takes the output from it, the input from it, the stimulus, and translates it into a way that our internal world, that is our soul, our consciousness, can understand. Alternatively, it's taking the soul aspect of us and moving it through if kind of the same translationary process into a way that we can physically understand, right? We can do things. Mercury, therefore, is going to be the planet of thought and the mind, more conscious mind, the thinking mind, which, as we just talked about with air, is going to be very resonant with air. But it's also going to be the planet of, I would say, dexterous skills. It's anything to do with kind of manipulating and translating the outer world to the inner or the inner world to the outer. So it's going to represent things like learning, thinking, speaking, communicating, as well as a variety of, again, skills with the hands or with the feet or any kind of physical skill that we can do, right? That we can learn, essentially. Mercury is not a gendered planet. It's the only planet that does not have a gender. It's neither male nor female, or we could alternatively say it's both male and female. It tends to kind of just float in whatever direction based on what it's around. It takes the form of other things. And that's because at its core, Mercury is about translating. And to be an effective translator, you have to be unbiased. You cannot be, right, swayed to one side or the other. Additionally, the masculine-feminine dynamic in astrology is one of projecting out and attracting in, moving in. And with Mercury, there's both a sense of needing to move outward, to express outward, but also take inward as well, right? So it's simultaneously doing both. So what we get when we combine all this is that Gemini is going to be the sign of exchange, right? How do I get there? We have an air sign, right? That's ruled by Mercury. Right out of the gates, we're going to get a sign that's going to be intellectual, and expressive in a way that's oriented towards what? Towards communicating, taking the thought, the thinking, the learning, and projecting it outward in a way that's others can understand, right? That translationary process. But it's also a mutable sign, which means it's reactive. And so I think the best expression or example of what we see if we think of Gemini is going to be a dialogue between two people. If you ever look at the sign for Gemini's always got, right, two people, the twins, right? Two people. What are they doing? They're exchanging information, right? I think there was a Vedic astrologer. I think at one point I saw mention, I don't know if this is accurate, but he'd mentioned that the original sign for Gemini was actually a couple in foreplay, right? What are you doing in foreplay? You're exchanging, right? Exchanging pleasure, exchanging romance. But even the sign of the twins, the symbol is always two people talking to each other, because that's what a dialogue is. It's an exchange of information, right? I talk, say something of value, say something I'm thinking. Maybe it's just something I'm feeling, perhaps. And then you talk, you respond. And that responding is the mutable nature of Gemini, that ability to hear something, right? Learn something, and then react to it. You said that? That's interesting. Let me respond. And so that's what Gemini is about, is this exchange with something else. Let me hear this piece of information. Let me see this interesting object and learn from it and then respond to it, right? I'll give something back to it. Especially when it comes to other people, this is usually going to come in the form of communication. So Gemini is going to be a very, very communicative sign. Strongly communicative. And I would say more than any other sign, Gemini truly has the gift of gab. It can talk your ears off if you're not careful. But it's not just about communicating through verbal means, right? Because we don't communicate purely through verbal means. We speak with our hands, with our faces, right? We make facial expressions. We have tone and intonation. And Gemini, being ruled by Mercury, means it's going to be very detail-oriented, because Mercury is a small planet that needs to focus on the details. Again, it's about that translation process. And when we translate things, we need to make sure that we have all the details in line. Otherwise, we're going to miss things, right? So Mercury is very detail-oriented. Gemini, being a sign that's ruled by Mercury, means it's also going to be detail-oriented, which means it's going to notice things. And so this communicative, think again, going back to the example of a dialogue, when we talk to somebody, we pick up on what? We pick up on their facial expressions, right? We notice their tone. We see their hands moving, right? For example, if you ever watch me doing these podcasts, I'm usually either pacing around or my hands are moving all over the place. I'm a very physically verbal person, I guess. But Gemini is attentive, right? It notices. It's always noticing everything. And something you'll notice with people with Gemini placements tend to have, especially sun or moon or rising sign, they tend to know a lot about a lot of things because they're always noticing things in a very intellectual way. Now, this mutability, right, this reactiveness of Gemini is because it's always looking to trade, right? It's always looking to exchange something, to get something else. There's this weird dynamic with Gemini where it's, on the one hand, very collective, but there's a slight, again, masculinity to it of, I want to do my own thing. It's not purely collective. And so through that, there's always this need to get something out of the situation. So Gemini can be very transactional, and usually will be transactional, and it's always going to be looking for the best opportunity. This is going to lead to indecisiveness. Again, if you're always attentive to things, what happens, right? You're going to learn new things. You're going to realize things you didn't know before, which means you might come up with better ideas, right? So you'll begin to replace your current thinking on stuff. And so this is the nature of Geminis, to be open to exchange, to be open to dialogue, to be open to learning new things, to open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. And so as a result, Gemini is inherently unstable because it's always changing its mind, because new information would dictate that we should change our minds. When new information is presented that presents something that makes more sense, again, it's an air sign, it's intellectual, there has to be a rationale behind it, then why not trade it out? And so that's what Gemini does. It's always trading bits and pieces of itself for something better, something new, in an effort to improve, in an effort to, as we'll see when we look through the houses, to find safety. So as a result, Gemini is can be seen as indecisive sign for sure. It can be seen as a dual, really truly kind of becomes the dual naturedness of it. And that has to do, again, with this needing to look in lots of different places, to always be attending to lots of different things. So Gemini is about exchanging with other people, exchanging with other things, trying to get the best information at any one time. And that comes through being attentive, being a good listener, being always watchful, being detail-oriented. Now, if we look through the signs, right, we'll set Gemini to the first house. The first thing I always like to look at is the fourth. And the reason is because the fourth house represents the inner world, right? It's the private self. It's the core. It's the roots of who we are. And so it's going to represent, in a lot of ways, our kind of conscious mind, if you will, the processing center for our being. And so for Gemini, the fourth house is Virgo. Right? It's the other Mercury-ruled sign. Virgo is a mutable earth sign. And what we'll see with the air signs, they all have this in common, is that they have earth in the psychological houses. So for the air signs, the most concrete area of life is actually the mind. All right? It's the internal rather than the external. And this is part of why the air signs tend to be a bit detached, impractical, theoretical, and the way they operate. But going back to Gemini, right? It's Virgo in the fourth house. So first thing I want to note, it's ruled by Mercury. And whenever we have a planet ruling two different houses, which most of the signs are like that, where most of the planets rule two signs, that means those houses are going to be linked, right? Because they have the same ruler. And so for the first house, whatever it's linked to, means it's really going to embody that other house. In this case, it's the fourth. So what is the thing that Gemini really embodies? It embodies the mind. It is a sign that's oriented around the mind. And it's a very good mind. Virgo is a sign of mastery. It's a sign of prudence. It's detail-oriented. It's trying to fix and support things. It wants to fine-tune by looking at all the little cracks and fractures so that it notices all the flaws so it can fix them, so that it can void them, right? So that it can make sure structure is there. And that's the way that Gemini thinks, right? That detail-oriented, that prudence comes from the inside. Right? It's in the internal mindset. And so for Gemini, it's always A, going to be paying attention to the details. B, it's always going to be very thought-centric. And C, it's going to be prudent in the way it approaches its thoughts and its thinking processes. Why this need for prudence? Right? What's going on there? Because this prudent mind, right? Because Gemini is a sign in terms of how it acts outwardly is not actually super prudent in a sense. It's not a planner like like Virgo would be. But rather it comes out in a way of, let me pay attention to things. Why? So that I might be ready for something. So that I might notice something that might be helpful, right? That might make me feel prepared internally. But why this need to be prepared? Well, it goes to the 12th house. What do we have in the 12th house? 12th house is Taurus. And Taurus is about what? As we saw in the last episode, it's about safety and stability. The 12th house is the unconscious or the subconscious. It's what we don't know. It's the hidden things. It's also going to represent undoings and loss and isolation. It's a very difficult house. But whatever's in the 12th house, whatever sign, whatever planets, we tend to not know those things consciously, right? We have to really dig deep to figure them out. And so for Gemini, what Gemini does not understand at a conscious level is safety, right? And that is going to necessitate this internal need to what? To pay attention to things. It's going to drive that need to let me always watch and look for the best option. Because anytime the best option comes along, I want to take it. Why? Because that will be more safe. That would be prudent. And so the driver for Gemini is this inner need to find safety by taking whatever the best option is. Another thing is having Taurus in the 12th house means Gemini lacks a sense of deep rigidity and structure, which means Gemini is unstructured, which means it's unstable. And this is going to be both good and bad. It means Gemini is going to be inherently chaotic because there's no stability. So it can move any which way at any time, right? But it's, again, without structure, without stability, we tend to not feel safe. On the flip side, it allows Gemini to be extremely flexible. And it's actually going to be one of the most flexible signs. I'd kind of put it, Gemini and Pisces, I kind of think of as the two most flexible. They're super mutable. They can handle a variety of situations and just adjust on the fly. So Gemini is naturally going to be super flexible in its ability to shapeshift and do things. This lack of structure is also going to allow for Gemini to constantly what? To constantly replace itself, right? Change its mind. Taurus holds on to things that it likes, right? But with Gemini, what we get is a sign that, hey, preference can change anytime, anywhere. I'll take the best option. To finish off the psychological houses, we look to the 8th. The 8th house is about danger. It's what we repress because it's taboo to be that thing. It's also going to represent intimacy and other people's resources and how we relate to people, other people on a deep level. And so for Gemini, it has Capricorn in the 8th house. Capricorn is about building things. It's about putting in the discipline and the hard work and the diligence to slowly work towards a goal. It's also about social responsibility, or really, maybe social responsibility is the wrong word, but physical responsibilities, right? We have chores to do. We have work to do, right? We got to provide. And so the 8th house, being about what we repress, means that Gemini is going to repress what? It's going to repress physical responsibilities. Why? And this is kind of a weird one to understand. Gemini's natural attitude is to, and we'll see this with the 7th house, is to try to learn from other people's experiences. It goes back to being prudent, right? The internal mind says, I need to be prudent. I need to be aware and conscious and always looking for the best opportunity. But Capricorn wants to dive into something and just work away at it, grind through it. But if I do that, one, I cannot focus on lots of other things because I'm stuck working on the task at hand, right? So Gemini says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tone down that sense of responsibility to something because then I can't be adaptable. I can't be changeable. So it represses it. The other aspect is Gemini really likes to have fun, and it really likes to socialize. And it really, as I said, it wants to learn from other people's experiences. We'll see this in the 7th house. And to do that, you need to have freedom to not be tied down by physical responsibility. So on the negative, it means Gemini can be lazy, for sure. Or at least it can be prone to being lazy. And it's not even so much lazy as it is, it wants to deal with the theoretical. It wants to enjoy the socializing, the fun, the intellectual, and not really worry about the physical responsibilities, right? But at its kind of a more healthy state is one of, again, not wanting to be deeply committed to something, because otherwise I can't have that flexibility to adjust when I need to. That said, the 8th house is where we approach intimacy. It's where we approach deep connection to something. It's also where we approach kind of the deep psychological parts of our mind. And so for Gemini, the way it approaches that is by, again, building slowly, chipping away, showing diligence. And as we'll see, Gemini is a sign that's totally oriented around the exchange with other people. And over time, what happens, right? If we have constant communication with something, what happens? We build a relationship. And so Gemini is really capable of building deep relationships if it works at it. The way intimacy comes with Gemini is this continual, slow approach. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk, let's communicate, let's exchange. And so structure for Gemini, especially mental structure, comes from what? It comes from constant little trickles of thought, little trickles of this need to pick up on things, right? Going back to that Virgo 4th house. Now, in terms of what Gemini wants, let's look at the 7th house, right? Because this ties into the 8th quite a lot. The 7th house is going to represent our partners, our close relationships, and it's also going to be about close attachments, and it's what a sign wants, because it's inherently what the sign is not. And what do we have in the 7th house? We have Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign of exploration and finding truth, finding meaning. So there's going to be a couple things here. Number one, it means what is it that Gemini is looking for? What is it trying to find? It's trying to find meaning and experience through the 7th house, through other people, through close relationships. So what that means is that Gemini finds meaning from others and through others. It also tries to find experience and get experience from other people, which necessitates that what happens? That it talks to them, that it relates to them, that it exchanges with them. We'll see this exchange a little bit more in both the 6th and the 3rd. But Gemini's wanting to be in participation with other people constantly. I don't want to say it's codependent, because anybody can be codependent based on factors growing up, right? You obviously got to look at your own chart. But I would say Gemini, more than a lot of signs, probably is prone to it, because it's always looking for other people to give it that sense of meaning, that give it that sense of information that it's looking for. That sense of, hey, if this person has the experience I need, right? They've been through this difficult challenge, and I haven't, and I'm afraid of it because I'm naturally very, right, always looking. I don't feel safe. Then if I can learn from their experience, know how they did it, maybe I'll know the best way to handle it, so that when I get there, I'm not as unprepared. That's kind of all the chart working together there. And so what Gemini is looking for from other people is it wants to exchange with them. It wants to find some piece of truth, some piece of meaning, some piece of information from the other person, right? It wants their life experiences. It also then means Gemini, by its nature, finds meaning by being around other people. So it's naturally going to be very social. Now, this doesn't just apply to people. It also applies to things and information. This is part of why Gemini is so attentive to everything. And is always picking up new little things wherever it goes. Learning and information is a very fun and tantalizing thing for Gemini. If we look at the 3rd house, the 3rd house it's about our local space. It's about our skill sets, kind of the things we kind of build up through repetition. But it's also the house of communication. And what do we have in the 3rd house for Gemini? It's going to be Leo. And Leo is the sign of self-expression. which means for Gemini, it itself expresses through what? Through its local space, through communication, through skills. So there's going to be a couple things then. Number one, it means that Gemini truly is the king of communication. It's the king of small talk, or queen, I guess, if you're a female. But Gemini, more than any other sign, understands communicating. Not just physically, not just the sound or the writing, but all of the things that go with it. Tone, emotion, facial expression, right? Body language, movement. Gemini understands communication on a level that pretty much every other sign does not. It's a super adept communicator. And again, it goes back to that attentiveness that it has. And it revels in that. It self-expresses through that. The other aspect is third house is about skills. It's things we do on a day-to-day basis, which means Gemini is going to be very big on its day-to-day. It's really going to have can be very routine-oriented, for sure, but it's really going to find a way to always be focused on what's around it all the time. This leads to it being what? Being very attentive. If I'm always focused on what's around me, I'm going to be attentive to those things. I'm going to notice things. And if I'm noticing things, or I'm noticing people, right, that's going to open up windows to what? To talk to them, to learn things from them. That leads us back to the seventh, finding meaning through others, through other things. And learning, again, from those experiences. The last thing is third house is going to represent skill sets. This means that Gemini actually has a lot of talent. It can be really good at doing kind of skill-oriented stuff. It's very good at honing its own skills. Why? Because it focuses on that. And this will also we'll see this in the sixth house. I said Gemini is the sign of exchange. It wants to trade something, right? Most of the time we'll think of it as dialogue. But the way Gemini gets through life is if it doesn't feel safe, the natural way is let me do something for you so that I can get something I want from you, right? That would be the natural, right? That's the exchange thing. So what is it? If I'm going to exchange, right, I have to have something to offer. There has to be something of value on my end to get something of value from you on your end, right? It's mutually beneficial when we trade, or in theory it should be. So in order for that trade to happen, right, Gemini has to have something to offer as well. And so that's why it hones its own skills. One of the issues, as we'll see when we look at the ninth house, is Gemini is prone to having lots and lots and lots of different, its hand in lots of different things. And so the difficulty for Gemini is going to want to be skilled at everything. I'm a Gemini moon, and Gemini Jupiter have this problem myself, where there's this tendency to want to do everything, right? You're going to want to have this career, you're going to want to have that career, you're also going to want to have this side hustle, also you're going to want to have these three hobbies, right? Gemini wants to always be in lots of different things at any one time. And it, again, stems back to the internal mindset. I'm not safe, I want to be prudent, and so the prudent way to do something is to, what? Have options. If I have options, right, and one falls through, well, I've got backups. So I'm okay. So Gemini is going to be very skilled. The last thing, we'll finish off the social houses. If we look at the 11th house, the 11th house is Aries, right? 11th house represents what? Our hopes, our dreams, our goals, our ambitions. But it also represents our social groups, our followers, our social connections, the people, friends we have. And so Aries being in the 11th house means Gemini is very self-assertive in regards to its social connections. It's a very social sign. It's wanting to constantly meet new people, constantly talk to and assert around other people. It's also very ambitious, is another aspect of that. And again, that ambition is driven by why? right, to achieve its goals. Why? Because I don't feel safe. Right? I don't feel stable. So I need to be constantly moving. And this is part of why Gemini is it's like a hummingbird. It's all over the place all the time. And it's because it self-asserts through what? Society. Another aspect of that is that Gemini is going to be constantly looking for new things, looking for new people to meet, new goals to achieve, right? And that leads back to this, again, issue of wanting to have its hands in lots of pots. If we look at the trine houses, right, we look at the 11th house. The 11th house is it's our worldview, but it's also where we grow. You could say it's purpose in some ways too. But it's how we grow, how a sign grows. And so what Gemini has in the 11th house is it has growth through Aquarius. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. It's ruled by Saturn. Aquarius is about how society is organized and structured. It's very eclectic because it takes society as a whole, but splits it into all its meaningful parts and components. Intellectually, it's about the same process, right? Compartmentalizing things. And so for Gemini, the worldview that it has is eclectic. It's compartmentalized. It's from lots of different things. And this makes sense. If its whole purpose, right, is about what? Or whole orientation is about finding meaning from other people and acting within society to exchange with them, then the natural reaction is for Gemini to constantly trade out bits and pieces of itself for something new. If I'm always talking to everybody, trying to learn what I can from them, you're going to pick up a lot of information over time. And as you pick up lots of information, you become very intelligent. Differing points of views always makes our own right thoughts and opinions stronger, better. And from a societal standpoint, right, human society has always grown the most technologically, etc., when you've had differences of culture, opinion, right, demographics, whatever, combining. It's when we always see historically the biggest moments of growth in technologies, when different cultures can come together and trade and exchange. And since Gemini is about that, the way it grows becomes this need to connect with everybody in society, right? Connect with everyone. Use that communicative skill, that need for exchange to grow itself. And by growing itself, it helps it, right, feed this need to become stable. In the 5th house, we have Libra. And this is kind of tie back into that kind of, again, it's not really laziness so much as a desire to kind of push off responsibility, in a sense. Libra is about what? It's about balance. It's about social balance, intellectual balance, right? Libra wants to take the opinions of everyone else into consideration and weigh them and come to a collaborative effort that's equal, or at least that is equal enough for everyone involved, right? It's a collaborative effort rather than my thinking, my way of doing something. And so Libra being in the 5th house means that what? 5th house represents creativity, represents passions, represents risk-taking. It represents romance, represents children, represents fun. And so with the 5th house being in Libra, it means Gemini has a collaborative and balanced approach to the way it creates, the way it sees risk. It wants to collaborate towards risk. It doesn't want to do risk on its own, right? This feeds to that need to what? Gain from other people. Let me exchange with you so that I don't have to experience this risk by myself. We'll do it together, right? Even if doing it together means we'll just trade something first so that I'm better equipped to handle the risk. In terms of fun, it means Gemini really likes doing things with other people, right? It's really passionate about the ideas of others, which again feeds back to that, the way Gemini is. It self-expresses through talking, through communicating, through exchanging. So it's in and around other people all the time. In terms of this laziness I mentioned, Venus rules Libra, but also rules Taurus. And Taurus is the 12th house. And as I said, the 12th house is undoings. And so what is it that can be an undoing for Gemini? Well, one, being stuck on something. If Gemini gets stuck on something, what happens? It loses the ability to shift, loses the ability to change its mind. The other aspect of that is because Venus rules both the 5th and the 8th, there's a connection there, right? What's the connection? Well, 5th house being creativity, being fun and passions and pleasure, means that things that are fun and pleasurable become something that can be potentially a hazard for Gemini. And what this plays out is a desire to focus on that stuff rather than things that are productive, rather than things that are responsible, right? Again, 8th house, we repress responsibility a little bit. It can also, I think, in some ways be a kind of a pursuit of pleasure-seeking, sort of. I don't know if I'd say Gemini is necessarily a pleasure-seeking sign per se, but maybe an aspect of that there too. The other issue is this need to, right, Libra, one of its qualities, again, is this ability to see other people's point of view, their preference for things. But an unhealthy Libra is one that's going to defer to the other person rather than collaborate. And so with it being in the 5th house, Gemini can often put off its own passions, often put off its own interests at the deferral of other people, right? And that, again, could cause it to kind of trip it up, right? Detract from its own ability to find stability. The other thing with this is being so collaborative on the things it's passionate about means Gemini actually is a fantastic sidekick because it's always going to enjoy doing things with other people. Geminis love being in and around other people typically. And so Gemini is really good as a kind of sidekick type of sign. This is part of why Gemini and Sagittarius get along so well. Obviously, they're opposites. But Sagittarius really has that kind of, I just want to go out and explore the world type of energy. And Gemini says, no, I want to learn from you because you're exploring the world. And Sagittarius loves having a partner to talk to share its experiences with. Gemini is happy to learn them, right? And so it wants to be that sidekick. That also means then that when Gemini is with other people, it's much more open to taking risks. I would say another aspect too is romance can be a very kind of thing that Gemini enjoys as well. Now, the last set of houses, the water houses, right? Or I should say the water signs are in the, I guess you could call it like the work houses. I don't know what you'd call them, but it's the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th. So let's look first at the 2nd. 2nd is our values, right? It's what we value. It's also our support systems, right? So both what supports us, but also how we support. And the 2nd house, Gemini has Cancer. Cancer is the sign of nurturing. It's about attaching to something and growing it, right? Think of a mother with a child. The child attaches to the mother attaches to the child, and then she raises it. She feeds it, she nurtures it. And so Cancer is about nurturing, and so the thing that Gemini gets as kind of its support is strong nurturing. If we look at the 4th and the second house, what we see is that Gemini has this very protective sense of family and support, right? Because those are going to be the two things that show our upbringing to a certain degree. The 4th being the family more generally, but the 2nd being the support we actually got, especially in early childhood. And so for Gemini, what it got was overprotectiveness, right? Cancer is very overprotective. And so the thing for Gemini is it felt overprotected as kind of its support. And the way it supports comes through this need to protect things. So what does it do? What's the natural response? Again, it goes back to the fourth. Let me be prudent in the way I think about things, the way I notice things, the way I tend to things. Because if I'm attentive, right, I can learn. I can change my mind if I need to. The other aspect of that is Cancer is very kind of, as I said, protective in its shell. What that means is Gemini values a conservative approach, right? It's risk averse. And this goes back to kind of fueling everything we've looked at so far. It just feeds back into it. It wants to take the risk averse approach. What's the most risk averse approach? Right? It's to not do the hard thing yourself. It's to have somebody else do it for you, right? Or if you don't know how to do it, talk to somebody who does first and trade, right? Let me exchange information from you so that I know how to do it. If we look at the sixth house is the house of servitude. It's the house of work. And this is where Gemini is interesting. Because Gemini is a very social sign. It's very collective, but it's very independent despite that. Again, think of trade. Trade and exchange, those are two parties, but you both get something. You're both going into it with an individual goal, but there's a mutual benefit because of it, because of the nature of it. And this is where we see the strong independent side of Gemini is in the sixth house. Sixth house is Scorpio. And Scorpio is about intimacy. It takes a very fixated view of something. Let me hone in on this thing and look at it. Scorpio is also extremely independent. And the sixth house represents work, represents obstacles, problems. It represents service. So there's a couple things here. Number one, the way in which Gemini is going to address obstacles is by taking a very intimate look at them. It's going to hone in on them, which means Gemini is actually going to be a really good problem solver, generally speaking, because it's going to, again, it's looking for the details. When you look for the details, what happens? You notice things. And so Gemini is going to look at problems very intently, but it's also very independent in terms of handling problems, in terms of working and solving issues. And Scorpio is a very obscured sign. It hides itself. It doesn't want you to see who it is so much as it wants you to see the results of its actions. And so for Gemini, the sixth house is an area of life, right? Problem solving is an area of life where Gemini tends to obscure itself, not show people what it's actually doing. And this is going to lead to the trope that Gemini often is associated with of being mischievous. It's going to do things in ways that people aren't always sure why that it's doing it that way. Doing it behind people's backs, because it's doing it by itself in a way that people can't see it. So this can lead to deception, right? Gemini can be a little deceptive if it wants to be. Very mischievous for sure. Because it's got that independent, self-motivated nature. Mars rules both the 6th and the 11th house. Right? So work, obstacle, problem solving. It's also going to be associated with what? Other people. Society, its goals. So Gemini is going to want to work independently on its goals and serving, right? While at the same time taking that approach as it faces society. So there's, again, that dichotomy, that need to always have some mutual benefit in mind when it's operating with other people, right? The exchange, the dialogue, right? There's always a give and a take. And that's the thing for Gemini. It's a trade. It's not I'm just giving unwilling, or I don't want to say unwillingly, but I'm not giving unconditionally. Gemini always has kind of a condition attached. It needs that trade because that's how it grows. That's how it learns. That's how it, right, finds meaning. That's how it stays safe. The other aspect of this is because the 11th and the 6th are connected, it means Gemini also is going to find a sense of duty, right? A sense of service towards society, right? Serving and society kind of go hand in hand. Social groups and service go hand in hand. And so Gemini is going to have, in a lot of ways, and we see this with both Mercury signs, they tend to be a bit servant-oriented. Again, it goes back to that kind of sidekick energy I talked about. Let me share things with you, right? Let us trade something. Sharing is a big-time Gemini word. You should always associate with Gemini. Gemini wants to share something. Right? I got this piece of information. Let me share it with you. Right? I solved a problem. Let me share it with you. In the hopes that, right, I get something back. The last house we haven't looked at is the 10th house. 10th house is Pisces. Pisces is where we become something. It's the whole. But it's the whole not in the way that Aquarius is. Aquarius is the whole, but mapped out. So you see all the ways in which it's, right, organized. In the case of Pisces, it's that whole of Aquarius that just melted together into one big soup. So you can't really distinguish anything anymore. And so what is it that Gemini becomes? Gemini becomes the public, right? The 10th house is our public image. What this means is Gemini kind of becomes anything that people want it to see it as. Why? Goes back to what I just said about the 6th house. 6th house and the 11th are tied together. Work and society, social groups, are tied together. I will do whatever other people need me to do, right? I will become whatever people need me to become. I already mentioned earlier, Gemini is really skilled. It's really good at solving problems. It's also it self-expresses through the 3rd house, the house of talent and skill. And so Gemini is naturally going to be good at a lot of things, or try to be anyway. And if you're good at a lot of things, what happens? People see you as, they kind of not really sure, because you're always doing everything. So you kind of are everything, right? You become everything. And that's why Gemini has Pisces, or what happens as a result of Gemini having Pisces in the 10th house, right? It becomes this amorphous thing that people look at and say, oh man, I don't really know who this person really is, because they're always everything at the same time. The other aspect of that is Gemini is always changing its own thinking. It's always changing its mind. Why? Because it's always looking for the best option, right? It goes back to the 4th house. Paying attention to be prudent. If I'm paying attention to be prudent, I'm always going to look at what's the best way to do something. And so as a result, right, Gemini changes constantly. And that's what people see. That's that 10th house Pisces morphism. So Gemini is always changing. It's always, and this is going to lead to it being indecisive, for sure. Not being sure of what it actually wants. A lot of time, analysis paralysis can be a really big problem for Gemini. Because of this need to, again, find the best option. Let me see. I don't know which one. What should I have for lunch today? I'm not sure. Do I want pizza? Do I want a hamburger? Do I want to eat healthy? Have a salad? What's the best option? Right? So to sum up, Gemini is a sign of exchange. It's about finding meaning through other people and having the flexibility to constantly take in new bits of information. Being attentive first, right? Being attentive to everything around it so that it can navigate society nimbly and avoid, right, hard work, avoid difficulty by being what? By being supportive to others, by being willing to dialogue and to communicate and to exchange and to share with other people so that it can get something back, that it can learn and always pull in new pieces of information so that it has the best information available so that it can survive and feel safe internally. Even if externally, even if consciously, it doesn't necessarily feel that way. In terms of duality, one other thing is that Gemini again, this kind of ties back to the 10th house. Gemini has the ability to have its fingers in lots of things. And as a result, worst case scenario, Gemini can be very double life oriented, or it can kind of be seen as two-faced. But that, again, it goes back to, if I have my hand in lots of things, right, and one of them falls off, I've still got 4 other things going on, right? Or what have you. It's that needing to keep options open and flexible so that I can be safe, so that I can make sure I can navigate the obstacles as they come. So Gemini is very intelligent, very flexible. It's kind of constantly moving. It's like a hummingbird in a lot of ways, darting to and fro. It's a very quick sign, very intellectual sign, very intelligent sign, very detail-oriented, and very much about communicating, dialoguing, exchange. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. We'll keep moving on through the signs. Hopefully my cold kind of clears up before I can record the next episode. But again, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for listening. If you're looking for a reading, I do natal readings as well, birth chart readings, as well as relationship readings. So if you're looking for relationship reading, maybe you started a new relationship, right? Maybe with the Gemini. And you're looking for one, you can reach me at my email, james@jdastrology.com, or you can just go to my website, jdastrology.com. Again, thank you for listening. I hope you have a wonderful week, and that's it.